This year, I'm putting $1,500 towards all of my clients' purchases. So if that sounds good to you, send me a message. So yes, it is true. The government has discontinued one of the first-time buyer incentives. So why do they hate us? You know what I'm saying? Why do they hate us? Well, actually, they've kind of replaced it with something else, which I believe is something better, which we'll go over right now. So what did they get rid of? Well, they got rid of the first-time homebuyer incentive that allowed for the government to pay for 5% of your purchase. And 5% isn't a ton, on a $600,000 purchase, that's about $30,000. So still helpful. But I'll be honest, I never actually recommended this program too often to my first-time buyers, and I'll tell you why. It's because there's a little bit of a catch. This 5% needs to be paid back whenever you sell the property, but it's not a dollar amount, it's 5%. So if you sold the home, you bought it for $600,000, sold it in 2 years for $700,000, you need to pay back that 5% to the government. So that's $35,000, even if they only gave you $30,000 in the first place. Short term, this may help some people get that house that they really wanted if they needed just a little bit more money. So it really depends on people's situation, but most of the time you'd be paying more money than what you actually got in the first place. So long term might cost you more money. So unless you need it, I would say usually just try to gather that money yourself and avoid the 5% borrowing that you got to pay back. And this is the program they removed. Essentially, the program was not being used enough. It is what the government seemed to have been saying, which I believe. I didn't see it being used a ton. I know some people who have used it, but not a ton. And as I mentioned, they made some other positive changes. And this change allows buyers to avoid paying some of the property transfer tax on their first home purchase. Property transfer tax, or PTT, is what the buyer has to pay every single time they buy a property. It's just a fee for moving the title from one person to you. Here, I'll put on the screen how property transfer tax is calculated. So it's no joke, especially if your property is expensive, like a $3 million property. Property transfer tax is $68,000. So yeah, it can be a decent sized tax. Smaller if you're buying your first place, most likely if it's a smaller purchase price, but it still is an extra 10 grand or whatever amount, which isn't always easy for first time buyers. They're just trying to get in the market, right? So this new change, we've already had this first time buyer incentive, but they've made a change here so more people and more properties are applicable to saving $8,000 on property transfer tax. For the last few years, you've been able to save $8,000 off PTT, not pay it at all on properties, $500,000 or less. And if you know Vancouver, a lot of first-time buyers are like, well, I can't even use that because every property here is more than $500,000, at least in central Vancouver most of the time. And so this brand new change now allows people to still save just $8,000, but instead of only up to $500,000, the purchase price, it can be up to $835,000, which means young families or people needing a little more space or looking for 2 bedrooms, they can also now save $8,000 off of property transfer tax. You still will need to pay the rest of the property transfer tax, but most of it is going to be covered by this exemption. Now, I did actually create a separate video talking about how you can apply this in your deal to make sure you're saving $8,000. I'll link that video up here and down below. My contact info is below, and I'll see you in the next video.